Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more incredible HFY stories where humanity proves once again why you never underestimate us. Now, let's begin. The council chamber was a cathedral of war, carved from black stone and steel, its vaulted ceiling veined with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Rows of alien war chiefs filled the amphitheater, their massive frames hunched forward, tusks glinting, mandibles clicking, scales catching the cold light. Some wore bone armor polished with the blood of conquered foes, others bore scars like medals. They had come not for debate but for mockery. At the center of the room stood a single human. Elias Rourke, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform plain save for the battered insignia at his chest. The scar that ran from his temple to his jaw made his expression appear perpetually carved in stone. He didn't shift under their scrutiny. He didn't blink when they sneered. He merely folded his hands behind his back, posture straight as a soldier awaiting orders. "You send us this?" one of the chiefs growled, his voice thick and guttural, echoing across the chamber. His species was reptilian, scales dark as obsidian, eyes slit like a serpent's. "A soft-skinned ape to speak for your kind?" He spat onto the floor, and the saliva hissed as it struck the stone. "Your worlds must be desperate indeed." Another, insectoid with mandibles clacking in amusement, leaned forward. "Does it even have claws? Fangs? Any natural defense? My hatchlings would tear this thing apart before it took its first step outside." Laughter thundered from every side. Some slapped their armored knees. Others let out screeches that rattled the chamber walls. Their jeering was not casual, it was coordinated, a ritual humiliation meant to establish dominance. Humans to them were interlopers at best and prey at worst. Elias listened. His breathing was slow, deliberate. His blue-gray eyes scanned the chamber, not with fear but with the patient weight of a man who had been underestimated too many times before. He had seen barracks full of recruits laughing at his silence before a drill. He had seen insurgents smirk at his unarmed entry into hostile villages. And every time the laughter had died the same way, suddenly and with regret. "You mistake restraint for weakness," Elias said finally, his voice low but carrying easily in the chamber. "It is a mistake your kind seems fond of repeating." A sharp bark of amusement came from the avian chief, feathers bristling in mocking display. "Restraint? A flattering way to describe fragility. Without ships, without weapons, what is your kind but prey animals dressing themselves in armor they did not earn?" Another chief, bulkier than the rest, leaned forward on fists the size of anvils. His tusks gleamed with gold inlay, trophies of his station. "Tell me, human," he rumbled. "Do you know what stands behind you?" Elias didn't turn. He had already noted the creature upon entering the chamber. Chained at the far end, bound by shimmering energy links, loomed a beast unlike any earth animal, yet eerily familiar in its menace. Nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, with 6 thickly muscled limbs and a head packed with rows of serrated teeth, the Zerkael crouched like a coiled nightmare. Its hide shimmered with natural armor, its movements fluid despite the restraints. Every breath it exhaled was a growl deep enough to vibrate the air. "The Zerkael," the tusked chief declared, puffing his chest. "Our galaxy's truest predator. It does not bow, it does not yield. Entire battalions have perished learning that truth. And yet," he spread his clawed hands, smiling with rows of yellow teeth, "we keep it here as a symbol. A reminder of strength." More laughter rippled, but it was tinged with reverence when their eyes turned to the beast. Even these hardened war chiefs respected the Zerkael, though they cloaked their fear in pride. "Tell me, ape," the avian chief cawed. "Would your fragile kind even survive its gaze?" Elias turned his head at last. The predator's eyes glowed with a baleful, primal intelligence, pinning him where he stood. Most men would have staggered back. Many species would have collapsed in submission. Elias did neither. He regarded the Zerkael as though he were studying a storm cloud on the horizon, dangerous but not invincible. "I know predators," Elias said softly. "I was born on a world full of them." The reptilian chief hissed in amusement. "A world full of predators?" His forked tongue flicked the air. "You mean your beasts of fur and fawn? Mere animals. Nothing compared to the Zerkael. You humans flatter yourselves with tales of your dangerous planet, but the galaxy knows better. Without your toys you are prey. Always prey." The word echoed, a chorus from every throat, prey. Still Elias did not flinch. Instead, he let the silence stretch until the jeering faltered. His voice, when it came, was measured steel. "Funny thing about prey. They learn to run. They learned to hide. And sometimes, they learned to hunt back. That silenced even the bravest mockers for a beat, the words hanging in the charged air. The chiefs exchanged glances, their amusement tempered by the faintest flicker of uncertainty. Then the tusked leader slammed a fist on the stone dais, breaking the tension. "Words," he growled. "Nothing more. Let us see if this ape dares to prove them." The others roared in agreement, the sound like thunder. The chamber was no longer an arena of mockery alone, but of anticipation. They wanted blood. They wanted spectacle. And Elias knew in that instant that the trial they whispered was inevitable. He looked back at the Zerkel, its muscles taut against the chains, its eyes locked on him with unsettling intensity. The air tasted of iron and challenge. Elias felt the weight of every gaze upon him, every sneer daring him to falter. A slow breath filled his lungs. His pulse steadied, not from calmness but from discipline honed across years of combat and survival. He had walked into ambushes with less certainty than this, but the rhythm was the same: observe, adapt, act. He let a faint smile tug at the corner of his scarred mouth, not amusement but acknowledgement. The chiefs thought they were circling prey. They didn't yet realize that the most dangerous predator in the room wasn't the beast in chains, but the man standing unarmed before them. The chamber trembled with the Zerkael's low growl, as if the creature itself recognized something its masters had not. Elias kept his gaze fixed, his silence deliberate, until the sound of alien laughter returned, uneasy now, brittle at the edges. The tusked leader leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Then let us see, human. Let us see whether your kind are hunters, or meat." Elias inclined his head once, a gesture of soldierly acceptance. "You'll see." The war chiefs did not realize then that they had already lost the first battle. The silence that followed Elias's acceptance was not calm but charged, like the air before lightning splits the sky. The war chiefs leaned forward in predatory anticipation, their eyes gleaming with cruel delight. They had mocked and now they would test. In their minds, this human would break in front of the galaxy's fiercest predator, and his death would be a lesson to his kind. One of the chiefs, his scaled hide mottled with old burns, rose from his seat with drunken bravado. He pointed a clawed finger at Elias and bellowed, "Let the ape stand before the Zerkel. If he lives through its breath, perhaps his words mean something." The chamber erupted in laughter, some deep and booming, others shrill and clicking. Elias neither moved nor spoke until the uproar waned. He looked to the beast that crouched in its cage, the Zerkel, muscles shifting beneath armored hide as it strained against the glowing shackles. Its breathing rumbled like an avalanche waiting to fall. Without asking permission, Elias walked forward. The war chiefs jeered louder, some pounding their fists against the stone balustrades, others chanting for blood. His boots struck the floor with unhurried rhythm, each step echoing in the cavernous chamber. He did not look at the crowd, his eyes stayed locked on the predator. The Zerkel snarled as he drew closer, slamming its claws into the stone with such force that cracks spidered outward. Its teeth bared in a wet gleam, saliva dripping onto the floor where it hissed against the energy restraints. The creature's roar shook the chamber, a sound designed to instill primal fear. Elias didn't falter. His heart thudded steady, his training guiding every movement. He had faced ambushes in deserts, firefights in jungles, and predators with less intelligence but equal ferocity in Earth's wilderness. His instincts told him to measure distance, to control his breathing, to project calm. Fear was blood in the water. He would not spill a drop. He stopped just short of the shimmering barrier that caged the beast. The Zerkael lunged, slamming against the energy field, sparks bursting in violent arcs. The alien audience howled in delight. Elias raised one hand, not in defense but in acknowledgement. The roar became a growl, deep and resonant, as if the predator were confused. It sniffed, nostrils flaring, catching scents no alien understood. The beast's luminous eyes narrowed, its head cocked slightly. Elias whispered in English, a language none of the chiefs could follow. His tone was calm, steady, the same he had once used when approaching feral dogs in ruined towns, or wild wolves on snowbound trails. "I know what you are. I know why you fight. You don't bend for chains, do you? You bend for strength. For intent." The Zerkael stilled. The chamber, which had been roaring with alien laughter moments before, grew quieter. The predator's breathing slowed, its head lowering by degrees until it rested mere inches from the barrier. Its eyes never left Elias. The growl diminished to a steady, rumbling purr, an alien sound, but unmistakable in its meaning. The silence that followed was absolute. Every chief sat rigid, their disbelief painted in every twitch of mandible, every flare of nostril. They had expected gore. Instead they witnessed something no record, no report, no legend had ever claimed: the Zerkael submitting. Elias lowered his hand until it hovered near the shimmering energy wall. The predator pressed closer, bowing its massive head until horned ridges nearly brushed the barrier. For a moment, it seemed as though the chains were no longer what bound it. The choice was its own. A hiss of panic escaped the avian chief's beak. "Trickery," he croaked, feathers puffed in alarm. "Some device, some hidden scent." "No," muttered another, the tusked giant, his voice trembling despite himself. "The beast recognizes something." Elias let his hand drop, turning away from the Zerkael as though the display had been nothing at all. He walked back into the open space of the chamber, leaving the predator watching him, head still lowered in acknowledgement. He stopped at the center, facing the rows of chiefs who only minutes earlier had ridiculed him. "You brought me here to be humiliated," Elias said evenly, his voice carrying in the hush. "You paraded your beast to remind me of power. But predators know their own. That is something your arrogance blinded you to." No one laughed now. Some shifted uneasily, others glared in denial, but none could erase the image etched into memory: the galaxy's fiercest predator bowing before a human. The reptilian chief hissed and slammed his clawed hand against the arm of his seat, trying to regain the moment. Coincidence? Instinct? A fluke of nature? His words rang hollow even to himself. Elias didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He only folded his hands behind his back once more, as if the entire display had been inevitable. "You can call it what you like. But that creature knows what you refuse to admit. And soon, you will have to decide whether you will continue to mock us, or respect us." The Zerkael growled softly, the sound less of threat than agreement, its glowing eyes still locked on Elias as though the others in the chamber did not exist. The chains rattled as it shifted, not in struggle but in restless loyalty, like a warhound waiting for command. The chiefs sat in silence, their laughter silenced, their arrogance cracked. The predator had made its choice, and now the council had no answer. Elias stood in the center of their grand hall, the lone human who had turned their pride against them, and waited. The game had changed, and the galaxy's most dangerous rulers were only beginning to realize it. The chamber held its breath, and the story was far from finished. The silence in the chamber stretched until it became unbearable. The war chiefs, who only moments earlier had filled the air with mocking jeers, now found their tongues thick and useless. The Zerkael still crouched behind its shimmering barrier, head lowered, its glowing eyes fixed not on them but on the human who stood alone at the center. Elias didn't move. He let the quiet linger, knowing that silence could be sharper than any blade. Every breath he drew was deliberate, every stillness calculated. He understood predators, understood the psychology of dominance, and he knew these chiefs, no matter their species, shared that same primal instinct. The moment they had witnessed was not just unsettling. It had unsettled their entire worldview. Finally, one of the insectoid chiefs clicked his mandibles in agitation. This is impossible. The Zerkael does not yield. It does not bow. Explain yourself, human." Elias turned his gaze toward the speaker, his expression unreadable. "Why should I explain what your eyes have already seen? Do you doubt your own senses?" A ripple of unease coursed through the assembly. Some shifted in their seats, others muttered in their native tongues. Their scientists, who had gathered along the chamber's fringes, scrambled to their instruments, trying to capture readings, scanning for hidden devices, chemical trails, electromagnetic interference, anything that could make sense of what had just occurred. Their murmurs rose in frantic staccato, only to collapse into frustrated silence. "There is no trick," one of them admitted reluctantly, his voice carrying over the din. "No pheromones, no projection fields, no interference." The beast responded of its own volition. The tusked chief who had been most boastful earlier now leaned back in his throne-like seat, frowning so deeply the golden inlays along his tusks glinted in shadow. Responded? To what? Elias allowed himself the faintest of smiles, though it carried no warmth. Recognition. The chamber erupted again, this time with outrage. Voices overlapped, some roaring accusations, others demanding further proof. The avian chief screeched above the clamor, feathers flared wide in disbelief. Recognition of what? Your species? Impossible. Humans are soft-fleshed and fragile. Nothing in you commands obedience. Perhaps nothing you understand, Elias countered, his voice like a knife cutting through their noise. But the Zerkael understands. Instinct doesn't lie. He took a measured step closer to the council's dais, each stride unhurried, his presence steady. Do you think predators are defined only by claws and teeth? That is the thinking of children. A predator is not fangs or scales or armor. A predator is will, patience, control. And when another predator recognizes those traits, it knows. It yields not because of force but because of inevitability. The reptilian chief hissed, his tail lashing against the stone floor. Words. All words. Where is your proof? Elias's eyes flicked back to the Zerkel. The beast had not shifted from its bowed position. Its growl reverberated low, not hostile but resonant, as though echoing Elias's presence. That was proof enough, though he didn't need to say it. The chiefs could see. For a moment, Elias's thoughts slipped to earth, to memories carved deep into his bones. He saw the frozen forests where wolves once stalked his unit during a survival drill, only to slink away when they realized the men would not run. He remembered the jungles where tigers had circled, unseen but felt, before choosing easier prey. And he remembered the dogs, the ones who had fought beside soldiers, fearless not because they were trained, but because they trusted the humans who led them. He let the memory sharpen his words. On Earth we lived surrounded by predators. Bigger, faster, stronger than us. For millions of years we were not the strongest. But we learned. We studied. We endured. We didn't grow claws, we grew minds. We didn't grow fangs, we grew fire and stone and steel. And every beast that hunted us, we turned into an ally or into a trophy. The chiefs listened despite themselves. Even those who scowled could not hide the tension in their posture, the slight stiffening of limbs that betrayed discomfort. The insectoid chief's mandibles clicked softly, no longer in mockery but in unease. Elias's voice lowered, almost conversational, yet carrying clearly to every ear. Do you know what it means for us when something bows? It means we have passed its test. And once that bond is made, it does not break. That is why your predator bowed. It knows what you do not. That humans are not prey. Not anymore. Not ever. The Zerkael growled again as if punctuating his words, the sound echoing across the chamber like distant thunder. Its chains rattled, but there was no struggle in the motion. It simply waited, watchful and loyal, its attention never straying from Elias. The tusked chief leaned forward, voice low, no longer booming with confidence. What kind of world breeds apes that command monsters? Elias met his gaze without blinking. A world that never forgave weakness. A world that forced us to become monsters ourselves. The chamber fell quiet once more. The chiefs exchanged uneasy looks, the weight of his words hanging heavy. In their long histories of conquest, they had measured strength by visible weapons, by physical dominance, by blood spilled on battlefields. They had not considered that strength could be invisible, etched into behavior, encoded in instinct, carried in the way one man could stand before a beast and not flinch. Elias knew he had won something here, not their loyalty, not yet, but their fear. Fear was leverage. Fear was survival. And fear was the first step toward respect. But he also knew this moment would not last unchallenged. Pride would demand a response. He could already see it in the narrowing eyes, the twitch of claws on stone, the stiffening feathers of the avian chief. They could not allow a human to walk from this chamber with victory untested. Elias clasped his hands behind his back once more, posture as steady as it had been at the beginning. You wanted a trial, he said. You've had one. The outcome is clear. For a heartbeat no one answered. Then the reptilian chief hissed, low and venomous. Not clear enough. The Zerkael shifted, claws scraping stone, its growl rising again as though it too sensed what was coming. Elias did not look away from the chiefs, but he felt the change in the air, sharp and electric. The silence ended, but not with laughter. This time it ended with the promise of blood. And Elias was ready. The chamber had turned into a furnace of tension, every breath hot with pride and anger. The reptilian chief rose to his full height, towering above even his peers, his scaled hide glowing faintly under the chamber lights. His voice slithered with venom as he barked an order to the guards clustered at the walls. Release it. Let the beast choose. If this human commands loyalty, let it prove so without chains. The words struck the air like a spark in dry brush. Protests rippled across the seats. Some shouted warnings, others urged the spectacle onward. The avian chief screeched in approval, wings rattling against the sides of his seat. The tusked giant leaned forward, uncertain, his pride at war with unease. Elias said nothing. He had expected this the moment he saw their eyes shift from disbelief to fear. They would not allow the moment to end quietly. They would demand blood. The guards obeyed, though hesitation clung to their movements. With talons and gauntlets, they deactivated the restraints one by one. The shackles hissed as their energy fields dissipated, and with each broken chain, the chamber grew colder despite the heat of so many bodies. The Zerkael stretched, muscles rippling beneath its armored hide, claws scraping gouges into the stone. Its eyes glowed brighter, no longer dulled by confinement. Free, it was even more terrifying, a storm-given flesh. The audience leaned forward as one, anticipation quivering in every limb. They expected carnage, a spectacle of dominance to erase their earlier humiliation. The predator was free, the human unarmed. In their minds the outcome was inevitable. The Zerkael roared, a sound so deep it rattled bones, then lunged forward. The chamber erupted with howls of triumph. But the beast did not strike Elias. It turned its fury on the guards who had dared unchain it. One swipe of its claw tore through armor, sending a body crashing lifeless to the floor. Another guard screamed as the predator's jaws clamped around him, his cry cut short in a spray of blood and broken metal. Panic ripped through the chamber. The chiefs shouted conflicting commands, their voices drowned beneath the thunder of the Zerkael's rampage. Elias stood perfectly still at the center. He did not flinch when the creature whirled back toward him, maw dripping red. Instead, he took a single step forward and raised his hand. The Zerkael froze mid-stride. Its breathing heaved, its massive chest rising and falling, but its eyes locked on Elias. A low growl rumbled from its throat, not a warning but a call, a sound of recognition. It lowered its head again just as it had before, bowing in the center of the blood-soaked floor. The chiefs gaped, their disbelief now poisoned by terror. Their most prized predator had not only disobeyed them but had turned its wrath against its keepers. Yet before the human, it showed restraint. Obedience. Elias stepped closer, each movement precise. He placed a hand against the beast's armored hide, his scarred fingers resting on the ridge above its eye. The growl deepened, vibrating under his palm like a great engine, but the predator made no move to attack. It leaned into his touch. When he spoke, his voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. This is what you never understood. You rule through fear. You chain what you cannot control. But fear is brittle. Chains break. What endures is respect, earned and never taken. The Zerkael shifted as though in agreement, its great head brushing closer to his hand. Elias knew he had to show more than composure. He had to demonstrate mastery. He turned and pointed toward the seats where the chief sat frozen. The beast's head rose, eyes following his gesture, but it did not attack. It waited, reading his intent. That patience alone was more terrifying than its violence. Your monster listens, Elias said, because it knows I am one of its kind. That is what terrifies you. Not that I control it, but that it recognizes me. The chamber seethed with conflicting emotions. The insectoid chief scraped his claws against the stone, torn between fury and dread. The avian chief's feathers trembled, his screeches now muted whispers. The tusked giant's hands clenched into fists, his jaw grinding so hard golden dust flecked the floor. None spoke because none could deny what they had witnessed. The predator had chosen. Elias knew the victory was not secure. Fear could curdle into violence as quickly as respect. Pride would demand retaliation. Already he saw it building in the reptilian chief's narrowed eyes, the flick of his tail betraying calculation. The chief rose again, voice dripping with venom. You think this makes you strong? You think this trick of nature proves your kind worthy? He spat the words like acid. You are still prey. And prey must be reminded of its place. He gestured sharply. More guards rushed in from side corridors, armored and armed, their weapons trained not on the Zerkael but on Elias himself. The predator snarled, stepping protectively in front of him, its massive body shielding him from view. The chiefs recoiled instinctively at the sight, their champion beast now defending the very man they had sought to humiliate. Elias placed his hand once more on the creature's hide, steadying it. He looked up at the gathered chiefs, his scar catching the chamber's pale light, his expression calm and unyielding. You wanted a spectacle. Now you have one. Tell me who is prey now. The Zerkael bared its teeth in a silent snarl, not at Elias but at the council itself, as though echoing his challenge. The guards froze, caught between orders and survival, their instincts screaming not to fire on the man shielded by the beast's rage. The chamber was no longer their arena. It belonged to Elias. And every chief present knew it. The chamber had become a crucible of silence. The guards who had rushed in stood rigid, weapons raised but trembling, their instincts warning them that any movement might provoke the beast that loomed before the human. The Zerkael crouched low, its armored body a living barricade, growls pulsing from its chest like rolling thunder. Its eyes, still glowing with primal intensity, never left the war chiefs. Elias kept one hand on the predator's hide, fingers firm, unflinching. His scarred face betrayed no fear, no strain, only calm control. To the watching chiefs, that stillness was worse than arrogance. It was certainty. He stood like a commander on a battlefield he already owned. "You wanted proof," Elias said, his voice even, each word cutting through the charged air. "You wanted a reminder of strength. Look at it. Your chains are broken, your guards are dead, and your most feared weapon shields me instead of you. What clearer answer could there be?" The insectoid chief shifted uneasily, mandibles scraping against each other in a nervous stutter. The avian's feathers remained flared, but his eyes darted toward the exits as though calculating escape. Even the tusked giant, who had sneered with such confidence, now sat in silence, jaw clenched so tight the gold inlays along his tusks cracked faintly under pressure. Only the reptilian chief retained his sneer, though it trembled at the edges. "It is one beast," he hissed. "One accident of instinct. You do not speak for your species with this display." Elias's eyes fixed on him, steady as steel. "You're right. I don't speak for my species. I am my species. This is what we are." His hand slid from the beast's armored skull, his arm extending toward the council with open defiance. "We've walked among monsters since we first learned to stand upright. We didn't cower. We adapted. We fought. We made the predators of our world our companions, or our prey. What you saw here is not an accident. It is a truth written in every human's blood. We are the apex. Even your monsters know it." The Zerkael rumbled as though agreeing, its vast chest vibrating against Elias's side. The sound rolled through the chamber like a declaration no language could match. The chiefs shifted, unsettled, their pride collapsing under the weight of something older than their empires, instinctive fear. Elias stepped forward, the beast padding with him, obedient without command. The guards parted, their weapons lowering despite orders, each one unconsciously giving him space. Every step Elias took redefined the chamber, turning their throne room into his ground, his territory. He stopped at the base of the dais, standing level with the chiefs, the predator looming just behind him like a living shadow. He raised his chin, his voice firm but not raised. "You laugh at humans because our bodies are not armored, because our skin is soft, because our claws are dull. But you never asked why, despite those weaknesses, we survived. Why our species did not vanish beneath the teeth of stronger beasts. Do you know what it takes to live fragile on a world full of killers? Everything. Every drop of cunning, every ounce of will, every spark of cooperation. We didn't inherit our throne. We built it, step by bloody step, until even the predators bowed." The chamber stayed still, every chief listening despite themselves. Elias's words did not roar, they cut, precise and relentless, like a knife pressed into a wound. His eyes swept across them, pinning each in turn. "So mock if you want. Call us prey. But remember this, your predators bow to us because they know something you refuse to admit. They know that under the scars and the weakness you see, we are more dangerous than you can imagine. And if you doubt that, test us further." The silence was absolute. No chief dared to answer. Some lowered their gazes, a few clenched their fists in futile pride, but none could summon laughter now. The memory of the Zerkael bowing, of it slaughtering their guards and then kneeling before a human, burned too brightly to deny. Elias let the silence stretch, making them sit with their humiliation. Then he gave them an out, one last chance to cling to dignity. "You brought me here as a guest. I will leave as one. But know this, the next time you call us prey we won't come with words. We'll come with teeth." He turned, placing a steadying hand once more on the predator's hide. The Zerkael rose, towering above him, but its massive steps echoed his, its body angled not toward the chiefs but toward the door. Guards melted aside without orders. The chamber's great doors opened with a groan of stone and steel, and Elias walked through them unchallenged, the predator following like a loyal sentinel. At the threshold he paused. Without looking back he spoke one final sentence, a blade of words driven into their pride. "Predators don't bow without reason." Then he was gone, the Zerkael's shadow fading with him, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The chiefs sat frozen, their grand hall suddenly cavernous and hollow. The avian chief's feathers sagged, his earlier bravado deflating into silence. The insectoid clicked his mandibles and thought, already calculating what alliance with humanity might mean. The tusked giant exhaled slowly, the first to whisper what none wanted to admit, Perhaps it is safer to have them beside us than against us. Even the reptilian, though his hiss of denial filled the air, could not erase the tremor in his tail. He had seen what the others had seen. He had felt the same primal instinct flare inside him when the predator bowed to the human. The universe's hierarchy had shifted in that moment, and no denial could undo it. Outside the chamber, Elias walked the ancient corridors in silence, the Zerkael padding heavily at his side. Its growls were softer now, no longer filled with fury but with something akin to contentment. He ran his scarred hand once more across its armored hide, a gesture of respect rather than command. The beast did not resist. Elias allowed himself a single thought as the council chamber doors shut behind him. They had wanted to see whether humanity was prey. Now they knew. And knowledge was a seed that would grow whether they wished it to or not. Behind him, the chiefs sat in their silence, weighed down by a truth they could never unsee. Ahead of him stretched the vastness of the galaxy, its predators and empires still blind to what they had unleashed. Elias Rourke, son of Earth, soldier of humanity, walked on with a monster at his side. And the galaxy would never laugh at humans the same way again.